But I really want to talk about because I think for me it wasn't quite as dramatic,
Right.
but for a lot of people it is. And I think the one exercise that I've heard that can be really really helpful is to literally go through and fire the idea of the higher power that you currently have, and then hire the idea of what you would want a higher power to be.
Right.
And I think what I hear from you is that you would hear this notion early on that you could come up with your own concept of a God and you'd consider it blasphemy.
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't. That's not
Can't come up. How is it a God if I come up with it?
right. But what, I don't know, like outside of that, like when we remove like the religious parameters of it all, and for me, like this idea of like, what would I want God to be? Because that's part of this exercise is like, if I'm, let's say I'm putting out like an ad
For a job.
for a job and I'm hiring for a higher power.
Hiring for.
What are
Position,
those
God.
qualifications that I'm looking for in a higher power of my own, right?
Yeah.
And, like one thing I'm looking for, hey, I want him to be loving. I want him to be forgiving. I want him to be understanding. I want him to be available. I want him to be comforting. And what I don't want is him to be condescending, judgmental, and to guilt me into, this, or, bring shame with him, like all the negative things, like
Right.
I don't want those aspects. And so, sort of coming to this idea that I can do that. I can put together this Frankenstein God of all the right parts of what I want and choose to believe in that. It can be a difficult thing to get to, like a difficult place to get to. But the power that comes from that is unbelievable. Like, oh my God. So when I think about God now, I don't think about me going to hell. I don't think about like the shame I'm bringing to my family. I don't think about like me being in an afterlife alone and burning and for eternity, like I don't have to think about all that stuff. Instead, I think like, what would God say to me in this situation? And he has a kind and loving response. And he has, all these qualifications that I've listed in this new God that I've hired. And if I can talk to myself with that attitude, it seems to serve me much better throughout life.
Yeah.
And I'm in a much better place to be available to myself, to be available to my family, to be available to others. And I can bestow upon them and our relationships that same sort of attitude. And because there's people out there that call themselves godlike that are judgmental as hell, because that's godlike according to their God.
Yeah, according to
right?
what they believe.
Exactly.
The message is being told. Yeah.
And like you said, they're loving us to death, where, they could be completely condescending. They want us to do this. They want us to do that because that's what their God says and that's
it's
what their
with the
God
very
wants.
best of intentions. The very best.
Well-intentioned people,
Yeah.
can send us to the grave. And so, today I get to choose,
Decide.
because it is a choice, that I'm going to put my faith into a higher power that is, of my own choosing,
Yeah.
my own design. And I think that that's why, it is so important for us to come to that conclusion in a 12-step program or even in life, because my higher power, like we've heard all sorts of different people talk about different concepts of a higher power. And I think people outside of a 12-step program, they may not specifically resonate with the idea of a quote unquote higher power. And I think that it's easy for a lot of people to think that this is a God-based program, but a higher power can just be like an elevated state of consciousness.
Absolutely.
You know, it can be this idea that I know what is best for me. And somewhere in my mind, like there is Cameron that vibrates on a higher spiritual plane, and I can look to that part of myself in order to get the answers that I need. And I think that, you know, when we use the word God, it's easy to
Cringe.
to really just sort of get thrown off. And I
Yeah.
think that a higher power is definitely a better way to look at it if that word scares you.
Yeah.